Hi friends, welcome back. So we're going to start our chapter 2 now, and I'm going to be honest with you, I love research and I am a proud nerd researcher. Research doesn't have to be boring. Like, you have to find what is interesting to you, and then it makes it more interesting, I think. What we just did with the Would You Rather, that was research. What I just reported back was other research, right? So it's research kind of just learning about how people are thinking about it and what we've actually studied and found. So we do research all the time informally. You just don't know that you're doing research. But how many things has psychology gotten wrong over the years? I mean, I want you to sit and think about that for a while, because you've had at least a couple. You're in 336, so it's an upper division psych class. How many things did we get wrong? And how did we end up knowing that it was wrong? We ended up knowing it was wrong because of research. We face different kinds of issues in abnormal psych than a lot of the other parts of psychology, so to speak. When you're doing research in social psychology, it's going to look a lot different than if you're working in a clinical setting, meaning that you're working with people with a disorder or dysfunction. We measure things like abstract motives, right? So things like conscious motives or unconscious motives, or assessing private thoughts if we're going to do some cognitive work, monitoring our mood. Most of us aren't really aware of our mood until we take a class like this. Calculating our own human potential. Those are all things that clinicians study that other people probably don't. In addition, we have to consider those different cultural backgrounds, because context is everything. Somebody's race, their gender, gender identity, how they're identifying, how other people see them, how their upbringing has been, all of those things come into account. So as we've seen, culture and role expectations are everything when it comes to kind of defining, at least how we define abnormal even, right? And we are so influenced by other people. So what do we do as clinicians? Clinicians, we are going to try and discover universal kind of general laws or principles that apply to function. So function meaning, how well am I able to socialize with other people? Because we are definitely meant to be in relationships, meant to be around other people in community, if you will. And typically, we cannot assess, diagnose, or treat. Oops. Sorry. Typically, we cannot diagnose or treat individual clients because if we're doing the assessment, because we would be biased. We're going to see them in a completely different way. So clinical research should be performed by people who aren't the actual therapist. And there's a variety of reasons. If you're somebody's therapist, you have to see that person sitting across from you in a biased way. Like, you have to see what they see and feel like they do. That's what empathy is, right? Like, really trying to understand it from their perspective. Whereas a researcher, we have to take the emotionality out, which is really hard. So in general, clinical researchers are going to do nomothetic truths about nature. We want to understand in big generalities, what do these things have? What characteristics does someone who has this disorder, what do they have in common? And we want to rely on scientific method and pinpoint and explain relationships between variables. That's what we're going to do as clinical researchers. And we're going to utilize 3 main types of investigations. I'll go through each of them. If you've had your research methods class, a lot of this will be redundant. You will have heard about a lot of them. Maybe not the case study, and it will have depended on if you've been exposed to some qualitative research. But really, we're going to look at the case study method, the correlational method, and the experimental method. So some of this, like I said, should be a bit redundant for you if you've had your research methods class. So nomothetic, again, is we want to understand and we want to know the universal or shared truths about abnormality. In general, what is it that's causing the dysfunction? What are the shared traits in those with a disorder? And how can we help? How do we treat them? What is it that we do? This is nomothetic. We want a basic general shared understanding. In contrast, and I put a nice picture there for you, in contrast, an idiographic understanding is individually focused. This is what psychologists and psychiatrists do when they're assessing someone to come up with a treatment plan. So when I am working with my clients, I will sit down with them and I take into account all of their background and information to see how it may be different from the nomothetic understanding, right? So in a idiographic understanding, we want to take into account a person's unique traits and experiences as well as their biology. So what is this qualitative research I speak of? So a lot of you probably were exposed a lot more to quantitative than qualitative research. Qualitative research is really about building a theory. It's what we do at the very beginning. When we don't know a lot about something, we have to know something exists and then describe it really well, right? Come up with good universal descriptions so that everyone who is looking at that understands what it is that we are researching. So the focus is on the phenomena in its natural setting, and we're really trying to understand whatever the phenomena is. We want to break it down into its components and in all its complexity and just kind of describe it really well. That's how we're going to come up with a theory. So qualitative is what we do when we don't know a lot about a topic. We start there. It's definitely much more flexible because we're going to have to go to the people who understand the experience. We're going to ask a lot of open-ended questions and learn about it. And we're going to look really kind of broadly across. Why and when do we use it? When we don't know a lot of information about something and we want to add knowledge or build a theory. Or if you're finding that there's just conflicting information that's out there. That's when I would also want to do qualitative. Take a step back, make sure that we're defining our variables really, really well. So I point this out because qualitative research has to come first, and then we can start quantifying it or breaking it down into its components and measuring them. So the first of many, and I'm not going, that's beyond the scope of this class. This class is for the different disorders. I'm just trying to give you like, how would we apply this to clinical research? So typically, when we do a case study, we are really just trying to understand either a person or a group or a situation in great depth. We want to learn from that case, so to speak. So a case can be a single person, such as Ted Bundy, or a serial murderer, or we can learn from a group of serial murderers, right? If we have a group of them and see what they all have in common. So case study is, I'm a forensic psychologist. I did kind of apologize right up front for that. But I would be looking at the background of someone who committed horrendous crimes and trying to figure out like what made them do what they did, right? So how and why did that happen? So I would look at something like a documentary on Ted Bundy, lots. So sometimes we'll study only a single case like Ted Bundy because they are unique or exceptional or just really different, which his was. Or a case study can be multiple people with a shared trait, such as serial killing, and look at the breadth of information that comes from whatever shared characteristics are across all of them, and look at the psychological functioning of them throughout their lives, from childhood to when they committed their crimes. So This would be a collective case study because, again, we're collecting a bunch of similar cases. They all had something in common, right? And we're going to make comparisons and then build a theory based on that information. So we use to learn more about little known or poorly understood situations, crimes, disorders. And it can also tell us how things change or evolve over time. So I love case studies. What are some of the benefits of our case studies? So the benefits really, we can help build a theory and understand that phenomenon really well. And we can start describing instead of quantifying things, right? And we may offer tentative support for a theory. If a theory has been posed, we can offer tentative support by looking to see if that theory fits, so we can kind of test it that way. We can challenge other theories' assumptions using a case study, but we can use it with a really small sample. We can use it with really rare things like psychopathy. There's 1% of the general population has psychopathy, so we can't just go out and ask people about psychopathy because the majority of people will not have it, and so that would be very difficult. So we can use this kind of research with a very small sample size because it is a rare phenomenon. And really, it's going to, there may be unique opportunities that present themselves, and we can learn a lot from them. Is it going to be generalizable? Probably not, but at least we understand the phenomenon a little bit better. So some of the limitations, which I already started with, are that, as with all qualitative methodologies, the case study has many limitations. It is used when we don't know a lot, right? So that in and of itself tells you, well, we don't know a lot. So we're just trying to start building knowledge. And because of that, we have limited knowledge of the topic, and problems are going to arise. So we have problems with both internal and external validity. So again, in case you don't remember, internal validity refers to having control over the variables. Well, we don't have control over any of the variables when we're looking at a case study. They're already existing and we are just looking at them. So we're not manipulating anything like we would in an experiment. And external validity has to do with generalizability. Can we then take this information and apply it? Probably not, right? Because again, we're still trying to understand what the components are. Observers can be biased. I mean, there's a reason that you chose to study this case, and that in and of itself may bias your way of looking at things. Everybody always talks about qualitative being much more biased than quantitative, but here's just something to think about. If you are trying to understand and describe something that is new, is that more or less or the same amount of bias as if you believe that you got it right and just make assumptions and build an entire survey and box people into answers? I think they both are biased because the same thing happens. You're choosing what to study, that bias is still there. At least with qualitative, like in a case study, you have to like point out your own biases so you can work against them. So I guess that's good. Data comes from subjective evidence, like we are deciding what we are looking for or not looking for. And we know how hard it is to fight against confirmation bias. So confirmation bias, we find what we look for and only what we look for. And when we're unfamiliar with a topic, we may not know what the key elements or key things to study are. We may focus our attention in the wrong place or the wrong direction, so to speak, or on the wrong things. We're not experts in it, so there's no way to know what's most important or less important. So again, the info is going to have a lot less generalizability. We can't be sure it works the same for others. So very low external validity. And when we study a specific case in depth, we learn a lot about those cases, but those cases may not be representative. They may just be weird. And there's a whole article that was posted in the American Psychological Association on their website about WEIRD, and it's an acronym. I stink at remembering acronyms, but it was something along the lines of the people are just different that were studied. So a good example would be Bernie Madoff may give us good insight into how a sociopath thinks, but that may or may not be how all sociopaths think. So hopefully that helps. So I thought I would give a nice visual of what I'm talking about. So when we're up here, see, this is a nice funnel, so it goes down like that. So up here, up at the top is qualitative methods, and those are where we're going to kind of know something exists and then start to describe it in more and more detail, right? And then down here where it's mixed methods, we're still going to be getting that nice qualitative, tell me more about the experience stuff, but we're also going to start quantifying it. And right about here where the mixed methods is, just below it, that's correlation. So correlation is about where this yellow band is here of the quantitative piece. So quantitative is down here, qualitative is up at the top, and mixed methods, sometimes they'll do a little bit of both. So they want to start, so a theory has come up, but they're still getting rich interview kind of information, and then they're starting to quantify it a little bit. They have so many characteristics or something like that. Then we have correlation here, and then our experiments go as we get further and further down, the more specific we are getting as far as quantifying things. Let's see, quantitative research methods. Now, once we've described something well, we can start to really quantify it, put numbers to it, and start measuring it. Once we start putting those numbers in, we refer to that methodology as quantitative because they are quantities or numbers. The problem is many people will start measuring things too quickly, and this has been a particular problem with abnormal psychology. So we feel like we really understand these disorders really well, so we start quantifying them. And what you will learn throughout the semester is a lot of these disorders have more in common with each other than they do differences between, which is kind of a bummer, and it makes it difficult to study. So really we want to just get more and more specificity. We want to get more and more specific. We want to quantify it in greater detail to kind of clarify those areas that aren't as clear. Figure out, first we want to see what some phenomenon have in common. Then we can start talking about difference, and then we can go into greater detail about that difference. So when they are relationships, they're correlational. If it allows us to predict or generalize, then it's going to be experimental in nature. So I'm going to first start talking about correlational designs. So correlations are when we are looking to see how we're looking at two different things. What do they have in common? What is similar between them? Was their relationship like? So we're looking at similarities. So with this, we're going to use existing data sets. We're not going to manipulate any variables. We can just see how people act in the real world. And this, again, is really at the top of the quantitative part of the funnel that we just looked at as far as the quantitative piece goes. So correlation, again, is the degree to which events or characteristics vary or change with one another. So how much do they have in common? How much is shared between them? Variables, again, just to let you know how I'm using the term, variables are anything that varies, anything that changes. So an important thing to remember about correlations is that we don't have control. We're just observing. We're not manipulating anything. And it's super important, if you remember anything from stats, methods, or this class, correlation is not causation. It's simply as one thing increases, the other thing may increase, and that would be something like a positive correlation if you see the background kind of picture here. If you see that two things are working in opposition, so as one thing goes up, the other one goes down, that would be a negative correlation, or they may not be related at all. So again, correlations are when we don't have control. And when you're going through the slides on your own, anytime you see them in blue and underlined, I have linked videos. Please do take a chance to look at those videos. I think they show it in a way that is really, really helpful. But I will try and go through them for you just to kind of help you understand. So if we have something like smoking and coughing, I don't know how many of you smoke or have been around smokers, but there is this belief that people have a smoker's cough. And while I've never smoked, I have coughed, and I'm imagining that all of you have coughed. So not saying that smoking causes coughing, because if you haven't ever smoked and you've coughed, then there's a reason, right? So some of the other reasons that people cough could be what? Things like choking, or if you have a cold or anything like that. So when we're looking at something like smoking and coughing, we want to see like what their relationship is like. So it's actually going to tell us what the linear relationship between two variables is. So what is the relationship between smoking and coughing? So if it were to be negative, so over on this side, a negative correlation is really just saying as one thing goes up, the other goes down. So as smoking goes up, coughing goes down. Well, that doesn't make sense if we're saying that there's a smoker's cough. So my guess is that we would infer that there should be a positive correlation between smoking and coughing. That is, as smoking increases, does the number of times we cough increase? So positive, if it's a positive one, it would be a direct correlation, meaning that the more cigarettes you smoke will make you cough the same, like as you increase the number of cigarettes you smoke, you will cough the exact same amount. Like the amount of coughing would go up incrementally the same. So somewhere around a 0.5, which is kind of a moderate correlation, that would be as you increase smoking, you tend to cough more. And somewhere around 0, one has nothing to do with the other. A negative 0.5 would be as one variable goes up, the other one tends to go down. And a strong negative correlation would be as one variable goes down, the other one goes up incrementally. So they work in opposition on the negative and then the same direction on positive. So positive correlations are sometimes referred to as direct correlations, and negative correlations are sometimes referred to as indirect correlations. So just to kind of reiterate, and again, if you've already had stats and or methods, this is going to be stuff that you already know, that a positive relationship, as one variable increases, the other variable increases, or as one variable decreases, the other variable decreases. So this could be something like coughing and smoking, right? So as we smoke more, we cough more. So this would be as we smoke more, we cough more, and it goes up. So again, it's a direct relationship because they are moving in the same direction. Negative relationships would be the equal opposite then. As one variable increases, so as X is going up, Y is going down. And that could be something like, let's see, sleep, number of hours slept. So if we sleep more hours, and then maybe irritability. So as we sleep more, our irritability goes down. Or as we have less sleep, our irritability goes up, right? They're moving in opposite directions. So I put on there, please note that this is in blue and it is underlined, which means that there is a link there. Correlation is not causation. And there are so many just funny correlations that really look like they are Like they're so similar that you would just think that one would have to have something to do with the other. But I'm pretty sure that the divorce rate in Maine is not affected by the consumption of margarine. But yet there's their correlation. So you can see there's those lines look pretty similar. So again, just funny. My favorite is the number of bars in the town and the number of churches. They tend to have a strong correlation, or shark attacks and ice cream. So just funny things. So please, if you remember nothing else about psychology, please remember correlation is not causation. All right. Moving on, we're going to go to what really kind of differentiates experiments. And now an experiment is a research procedure in which a variable is manipulated and then the effect of the manipulation on another variable is measured. That sounds like, wow, what? So we're going to vary something, and it could be something like eye color in our class. So everybody has a different color eyes, right? I'm assuming. We can see whether that impacts our choice for chocolate. We could do something like that. So now a true experiment, we're not talking about a true experiment yet. I want to explain experiments and then I'll go into a true experiment. But a true experiment is going to take that a step further, and they're going to have a controlled group to compare against and random assignment into groups. So clearly we're not in class and I can't hand out Reese's or Kisses. Otherwise I would. So I want to try something a little bit different. I want you to choose one of those candies based upon your own personal preference. So if I had those and you had to take one, and if you don't like chocolate or you can't eat chocolate, just think, okay, which one would I like to look at better? Like, you have to choose one. So if we collected this data from each of you, what can we do with it? How would we be able, what could we do? What research question could we answer with it? So what's our research question? What do you think? Should it be which is better, Hershey's Kisses or Reese's Peanut Butter Cups? Which is most preferable? What's our hypothesis? So we talked about eye color. Do you think eye color has anything to do with whether or not we like Reese's or Kisses? So I will talk about this a bit more on our discussion board. All right. So I keep referring to different parts of research, but fundamentally we need to understand when I say variables manipulated, I'm really talking about the independent variable. I brought up independent and dependent variables, so I'm going to help you figure out what I'm talking about. So what is something that is different between us? In general, that would be things like our sex at birth, our race, our height, our weight, our hair color, our eye color, the color of shoes that we have on, if we have on shoes, color of our shirt that we have on, right? Any of that would be variable or differing between us. Now, whatever it is that's different among us is our independent variable. So it's the variable that can note the difference between us. So if we were going to see, and that's why I have this lovely picture up here, if we wanted to see the effect of watering plants, we could see if we give a lot of water, what happens, a little bit of water, what happens, and too much water. So we can give a good amount, a large amount, and then see what happens. So the independence, the amount, that's what was varied. That's what was different between these three plants. And then whatever we measure what's affected by that variable amount of water, that is our dependent variable. So whatever we measure is our dependent variable. This is usually easier for people to spot than the independent variable. So I'll jump right into dependent variable. So what we measure to see if the IV made a difference, that is our dependent variable, friends. So which candy, whether it was Reese's or Kisses, was preferable by eye color being the independent variable, and which candy we chose. So whichever candy we chose is our dependent variable. Hope that makes sense. So I did put some practice ones on the next slide, and you can look afterward. And again, when you go through these questions, I have the answers on the slides, but I wanted you to be able to look through and kind of ask yourself. So if an experimenter studied the influence of self-care training on the level of anxiety of adults, the dependent variable, or what we measured, would be the level of anxiety, and the independent variable would be what we varied, which would be the self-care training program or not. The second one, where it says instructor attentiveness affects student ratings of instruction, what we are measuring is the students' ratings of instruction, and what we vary is the amount of instructor attentiveness. So some will be very present, and some are going to be not so present. And finally, the last one, negative teacher expectations result in diminished student academic performance. What's being measured is the student academic performance, so it is our dependent variable. And what is being varied is the teacher expectations. So that's our independent variable. I hope that helps make sense of IVs and DVs. You probably should know those ones. So hopefully this is just an easy kind of review. So finally, last but certainly not least, would be our experimental designs. The difference between an experiment and a quasi-experiment is having a control group for that comparison and having random assignment. Everybody always wants us to have everybody have an equal opportunity to be selected. And that's just not always the case based on our population. So we can make up for that with random assignment. So an experiment is a research procedure in which a variable, anything that varies, is manipulated or systematically controlled, and the manipulation's effect on another variable is observed, our dependent variable. So again, the manipulated variable is our independent variable, and the variable that is observed or measured is our dependent variable. This model allows us to ask questions like, does a particular therapy relieve symptoms of a particular disorder? This, friends, is what allows us to talk about cause and effect. So in an experiment, control is everything. It is key. Researchers have to try and eliminate all confounds. You guys remember what a confound is, right? So confound, something that gets in the way. It's a variable other than the independent variable that may also be affecting the dependent variable. 3 features help us kind of like know that we can talk about cause and effect. And that would be the control group. So we have the control group is a group that does not get exposed. It is not exposed to the treatment. So that way we can compare those that are exposed to the treatment and those that are not exposed to the treatment to see if there's really a difference. But we have to make sure groups are not different to begin with, right? We have to make sure that our groups are not fundamentally biased or weird or different in and of themselves. And we do that through random assignment. So researchers have to watch out for those pre-existing groups because there may be a reason that people selected into them. And in order to do that, we would just do some random assignment. And this ensures that every participant has an equal chance of being placed into either group. How we can do it, like we can flip a coin, heads, you go to this group, tails, you go to that group, head, go to this group, tails, you go to that group, heads, tails. Can do the hat method, put everybody's name in the bag, mix it up, pull it out, pull it out, pull it out. It gets its name from people actually putting them in a hat. And then a blind design is a real big confound that we didn't know what to do is when we may unconsciously smile or nod or encourage people that are doing what we want them to do. So if we can just make sure that the person who's actually like presenting the research, so if I am going out and I'm the person collecting the data, I don't know what it is that it's trying to prove or what a good or a bad result would be. That would be a blind. And then finally, random assignment, friends. We talked about a little bit, and you will notice again that it is blue and it is underlined, so I do have a short video for you there. But you just want to make sure that each participant has an equal chance of being assigned into either the control or the treatment group. And this lovely picture, this is the best one I could find, you can see that's supposed to be a hat, friends. That's supposed to be a hat. So we have this sample of people, and then we put all their names into this hat, and then we choose from the hat, and they either go in like one in control, one in treatment, one in control, one in treatment, one in control, one in treatment, until they're all selected and we have enough people for each of our groups. Hope that makes sense of the material. You will find that there is probably a lot more. This is what I really want you to focus on. So just do that, and I'm going to put your assignment into your discussion board this week. So you'll be able to work on your assignment within the discussion board. That's all you will have this week. So make sure that you go through the slides, click on those lovely videos, should be helpful. And because if I tried to show you through here, they tend not to work as well. Then once you're all done with that and your discussion board posts, take the quiz and you should be great for this week. If you have any questions or anything, please email me. And I hope you have a fabulous day. Thank you so much. Bye.